Hello and welcome to 10 Minutes with Ten10. I'm Ash, co-founder and CTO at Ten10, and over the course of the next 3 podcasts, we're going to be exploring AI adoption within organizations and practical considerations for actually making it happen. I'm delighted to be joined by Miriam today from Coincidencity.
Thank you very much, Ash. I'm very much looking forward to this podcast series.
I think there's a big disjoint in terms of what organizations think AI is, and a lack of understanding, and often a misunderstanding.
For sure, yes.
I know from my own experience of sort of running round tables and that kind of thing, everybody thinks of AI, but often that means different things to different organizations. In our minds anyway, what that means to us is, and this is how we group it, just to make it a little bit easier. So 3 sort of broad sectors. So you've got machine learning. So this is where you are using models that have been trained to be able to identify patterns or forecast data, and then to be able to infer from that at runtime, off the back of that, to be able to make predictions. That's been around a long time. You've then got the middle section, so sort of agentic AI or intelligent automation or AI agents. So using large language models to automate workflows and systems and that decision-making process, so to introduce autonomy. And then the third thing, I think, is what a lot of organizations are talking about, which is really using AI at a personal or team level to improve productivity and to allow people to sort of do more. Is that sort of broadly what you're seeing, Miriam?
Yes, and I think the business side users that we tend to deal with, they often don't have that clear distinction. They muddle things up, and they tend to range from thinking about AI as purely automation, and by that meaning that whole processes could be taken away, handed over, and very often they're not clear that they will still need supervising. They're like, right, the process can be handed over, AI will solve this, and we don't have to deal with this part anymore, which for many sophisticated processes is not quite right. On the other hand, you have many business users who think, well, if we just increase personal productivity, surely then everything will improve automatically because nobody has enough time. So if we have more time, we'll get more done and create more value, which also doesn't quite work, because even using AI at that level only gets you 60 to 80%. You still need that last bit where you need the human to actually take charge and make the decision.
That human in the loop sort of aspect of it.
Very much so, yeah. So that's what we are seeing quite a lot. And I think that's also, and I'd love to hear your views on how you can blend the 3 types that you just described to create better outputs, but also more assurance, more confidence in the AI tools, because we're seeing on the business user end that many users dabble with AI, whether that is the AI chatbot or whether that is a bit of agentic AI that's been built for them. And they see that it's not 100%, and they're like, well, actually, I could have done it faster myself, or is it really aiding us that much? Is it really worth it? So I'd love to hear how you blend those different types.
Yeah. I think you kind of get more value from blending them.
Yeah.
But as well as that, there also needs to be recognition that those 3 different pillars, if you like, the skills and the people required to do them are completely different. So whilst it's all AI, within those 3 different pillars, that machine learning side is very much focused around data science, very much built from maths. That agentic AI side is more of exactly as you said, that sort of automation of workflows. So that's much more around that sort of business analysis, understanding what the business wants to achieve. And I think that's maybe a common thing that's often lacking in terms of defining upfront what it is that the business actually wants to achieve from this, and what the ROI looks like and what success looks like.
That's a really, really good point. If you could dig a bit deeper in it, because I know from having spoken to many leaders, they think they need to hire data scientists.
Yeah.
But from what you're saying, I'm guessing that's not actually necessarily true. If they are running certain businesses, whether they're consultancy, they're professional services or something like that, they don't necessarily need data scientists.
No, I'd agree with that completely. If you're doing that machine learning aspect of
Yeah.
it, then yes, there is definitely a data science element to that. Depending on what you're doing with it, a lot of the tools nowadays are actually pushing down the skills required so more people can do that.
Right.
I guess it's similar to what we sort of saw in software development of the last few decades, where 30 years ago you needed somebody who was a developer who really understood at a deep level the code and how it communicates with the operating system, and even just to get it to do a trivial thing like to be able to produce a window with a couple of buttons on it. And now we see that's pushed down. You don't need those super hardcore skills anymore to be able to do that. But at the same time, we're expecting developers to do more in terms of they're expected to talk to the business. They're expected to work out what the requirements are. They may be expected to plan, run that project, test it, maybe get involved in more in deployment. So they're being asked to sort of move up the food chain. And I think that's what we're seeing, particularly in that agentic AI space, where you need individuals who are capable of running this as it's a tech project, but it's also a change project. There's a lot of involvement with people to be able to understand what those workflows are. And in fact, are they optimal? There's no point in going away and just automating wildly something that's evolved and probably shouldn't look like that in practice.
Yeah, and this is a question that we see a lot, that when leaders are asked, what would you like? They're like, well, we want everything. We want the whole shopping list. We want the whole Christmas wish list, and they want everything. And when you then probe into, just as you were saying, you find out that actually there are a lot of items on that wish list, which is but do you need it? Do you really need 15 reports on the same topic formatted in these different ways for different stakeholders? Or are there better ways of, for example, communicating with these stakeholders and still fitting to their requirements, but actually enhancing the relationship that you build, where the reporting is just a tool? So that's just one example where there's processes that we see in place that probably shouldn't be around. And it's not just reporting. There are many other kind of processes that should probably be looked at.
Completely, rather than just blindly automating it and ending up with the same thing. I mean, one thing that the automation does lend itself to, bizarrely, is the fact that you can then easily specialize the reports that are produced for many different stakeholders, rather than having to hand crank through all that data and to be able to generate those graphs. Whether you should or not is another question, but the skills required then to communicate with the business and say, well, do you need 5 different sets of reporting? Wouldn't it make more sense to align everybody and sort of combine that into one? That's a different skill set to what's seen as that traditional sort of technical developer kind of role.
Yes, and having been involved in many of those projects, even before AI came around, I definitely know it's a hard part, because you find different parts of an organization speaking different languages.
Completely.
They're just not speaking the same language, and they're having a difficulty to see. What do you do in your side of the business? Because I know that you're working really hard with the people that you're developing. Not the software, but like developing as people to address exactly that problem.
It's when you're putting junior people, particularly in an organization, there's always an element of, even if they're exceptionally bright, when they land, you need to orientate yourself towards that business and that sector. Now, there will be certain terminology and certain phrases and certain technologies which are common, and they could be expected to know or expected to Google it. Equally, you'll find yourself in that organization where there's 1,000,001 different acronyms that are all used, some of which will be internal to that organization, some of which will be internal to teams in that organization. And if you're really unlucky, you may find that different teams reuse the same acronyms to mean different things. But unpicking that is really, really tricky. What we found the best way to do that in practice is when the first people land in an organization, they actually create a set of assets off the back of that, which is almost sort of an orientation guide, essentially. So what we say to people is that when you land, you're almost in a unique position where you don't stay new for long, and you'd be amazed at how quickly you're no longer the new person and people are coming to you. So that's a unique opportunity with a fresh pair of eyes to be able to note all this stuff down and then to be able to define it. So then when the next people come along, they're given a head start. In fact, we work with some organizations where they then use that internally because they haven't been able to create that.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that. And it's also when you're the new person, you can ask all the questions and you get listened to a lot more when you come in with new ideas. We're seeing, being on the other end of that, we are seeing how appreciative business users are when they have team members on the more technical side who make that effort, who speak to them, because it's a bit like nobody ever wants to speak to finance. Nobody ever wants
that's harsh.
Well,
you can say that as an ex-CFO.
Yes, that's right. I've been that person. And finance functions over the last few decades have made great progress of embedding them into the business and therefore adding real value. And the same happening for the technology piece is incredibly valuable, particularly with AI now, because even if I leave the automation side, the machine learning side a bit to the side for the moment, the other parts, having the ability for a business user to tap into somebody with a deep technological know-how on how to, say, tweak an agent that people thought it was great, but actually in the real world, things maybe need to be tweaked, things need to be changed, and being able to speak to that person quickly is incredibly valuable, rather than having to go through formal processes and being held back and saying, yes, we'll get back to you in 3 weeks' time, in which that, so-called automated agent is sitting there doing nothing.
Or potentially worse, doing something wrong.
Oh gosh, yes.
And I think that's a really good point there particularly around the engineering rigor that has to go into a lot of these things. So yes, you deploy that agent. It may be that agent works well, but over time that may drift. The outcomes may not be as good as they were when it first started. So that observability and monitoring is really important.
Yes.
Because I guess in pre this AI age, in times of old, if you had a software platform deployed on some infrastructure, if nothing changed, you get the same outcomes. You can't. We're not in that space anymore. It's now, it can drift. It's non-deterministic in its nature, so it requires much more engineering rigor. And I think that's one of the challenges when you have teams of individuals who maybe don't come from that tech background. So again, in that development space, over the recent years, we've seen the rise of tooling which allows business users to be able to create apps, which is really powerful because those business users know exactly what they want. They're able to create apps using that. But sometimes the challenge is without that engineering rigor, they can find themselves painting themselves into a corner fairly easily. Maybe it doesn't scale, or heaven forbid, it's not secure, or they start off well, they're getting through the work that needs to be done, and then they found they got a maintainability nightmare. To make changes, suddenly lots of things break when they try and make a single change. All those things require engineering rigor, but at the same time, to your point, what you don't want to do is add a whole load of process which just slows the whole thing down. And in, I guess, normal organizations pre-AI, nothing changes, so that's okay. The safety thing is, we won't change it, so therefore it's as good as it was. You can't rely on that anymore.
No, and I mean, you said in organizations pre-AI nothing changed, but actually what did happen, and I'm guessing the whole thing with AI is just, shining a huge spotlight at that. What did happen in organizations pre-AI is people created their little workarounds. And I remember working in very large organizations, and because something in the tech stack didn't quite work or didn't quite deliver, everybody had their own little Excel spreadsheets and their own little analysis tools, and later on their own apps, which obviously created huge silos everywhere. Very often, that was my pet hate as a CFO, that there was no common source of truth, no single source of truth. And you really had to then go and dig down, spend sometimes weeks and months trying to come to an answer that was acceptable to all the various stakeholders in an organization, particularly when it came to money, which you'd think would be a straightforward answer. But oh no, the numbers can be interpreted in many, many different ways. And so you had that already. And now with AI, the opportunity for things going even further apart without that engineering rigor, without keeping things together, without holding the reins somewhere. Yeah, that's crucial.
And I think that point around what's really happening on all the workarounds is a really key thing. We come across that a lot in automation, where you have a workflow which is defined, and there'll be a diagram beautifully explaining how it was created in the first place. But then on the ground, it doesn't look like that anymore. And that's often not captured, and it's often not documented. So that comes back to the people side of being able to elicit those requirements and actually understand.
It's the shadow organization. That's what we call it. It's like the official, which has the nice org chart and all the workflows and responsibilities, and then how things really get done because somebody over here needs something done over there, so they talk to each other, which in many ways is really important because sometimes the structures impede progress. And I have seen many projects being delayed purely because some boxes haven't been ticked, so that's a bad thing in itself. But also it creates conversations and it creates ideas. Innovation comes from there. And I'm not necessarily talking innovation like the Post-it notes, but it did come from that kind of connection. But also I chat to you, Ash, from the IT team and say, well, I wish it could do this. And he's like, why do you want this? You really want X over here. So you do want to not lose parts of that shadow organization.
Oh, completely. It's a valuable thing. It's a balance to be struck between that innovation and how it's created, but at the same time capturing it so that shadow organization isn't quite so shadowy. I remember a few years ago working with a university, and that was a very interesting scenario because they had their sort of enterprise tooling, but then they had applications that were created by particularly the comp sci and engineering departments that were running on machines under people's desks. And when they came in and did an audit of what was actually running end to end across the live estate, there was more than 300 apps where nobody could actually say exactly where these things were. So I think when many companies think about AI, they really focus on that personal productivity part, and they often don't think of the automation, let alone that sort of machine learning side of it. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, very much so. And the really interesting paradox that we're seeing, and that is creating a lot of disillusionment almost with AI, is that personal productivity does go up, whether it's with the agentic AI, whether it is with the chatbots even. It absolutely goes up for individuals. But companies are not seeing that individual productivity flowing through to a company-wide impact. So there's been research recently that shows that impact on organizations is, and we're not even talking bottom line, it's just impact in terms of increased productivity company-wide, is only at around 1% to 3%, which is obviously, it does make the CFO wonder, why am I paying more to increase productivity but not seeing any returns? So there is a big paradox going on.
It's probably worth us unpicking some of that a little bit as well, because there's that point of an individual focused on that, and then the right sort of framework to allow that to be surfaced up to a team level, and then the advantages that they're seeing to be shared sort of throughout the organization. But at the same time, you also need some top-down design there as well in terms of what's the organization need, particularly focusing on some of those automated workflows, what can be done with chatbots and agentic AI to be able to drive productivity for customers as well as for the internal users, but also for those internal users within the business.
Absolutely. And to look as well, on the one hand, you need that, and it's crucial that you have that rigor that you always talk about, that technological rigor that keeps all these AI tools together, that allows the scaling, whether it's going up to team level, whether it's flowing into other areas. But it also means that you have to think very carefully about what do you do with that improved productivity. So, for example, if in the past it took you 2 days to create a particular stakeholder report, and now it takes you half an hour, what do you do with the rest of the time? And the inclination for many business users is to jump like, oh, let's do more reports. Whereas the real strategic value comes when you then say, I'm going to take another 2-3 hours and think deeper, go and analyze deeper, collaborate with others, get more opinions, and really take a more profound understanding of what these trends, what these insights are telling me, and how that can add strategic value to the work we're doing, rather than just doing more of the same thing.
Completely. And how to, if you're just generating more and more reports, for example, what's the actual value? What business decisions are you actually using from those reports to then drive that change through? Essentially, that's, if they're just being generated and you're going to generate more of them, that actually adds more cognitive load further down as well, because this whole concept and idea of AI slop, where if you're able to generate more at pace, but that still needs to be consumed, that still then needs to
Absolutely.
be useful in order to be able to do something with it.
This focus on productivity only, a particular individual productivity, is a race to the bottom. Nobody's going to maintain a competitive advantage or develop a competitive advantage because of it, because it's just going to be the baseline, if implemented correctly, of course. Mm-hmm.
So I think there's almost two key strategies here. There's sort of a top-down and a bottom-up approach.
Yes. Yeah.
So in terms of that bottom-up approach, those are the people on the ground who are using processes and these systems day in, day out, to the point you made earlier, who have all those workarounds in place. For them to be able to be empowered, to be able to build things, they need the skills, they need everything else in place to be able to do that. But once they have that, that's only useful if there is a forum and a mechanism whereby they're able to actually scale that up. So they're able to share that with their teams. Their teams are then able to share that with other wider teams. And then there's a view across that sort of organization in terms of what people are doing and sharing that knowledge and really understanding it, but then also making it available. You don't want these little silos of work to be going on. It has to be made clear and communicated that this is happening, whether that's done through show and tells or whether that's done more formally, that works. But the key thing is really identifying somebody in each team who can be an evangelist around this, who's an early adopter, who's very keen on it, to be able to find that individual, train them, give them the skills they need, and then have them sort of commence work on this.
Absolutely. And I would suggest it goes even a step further, because it is great to have these evangelists, and that's something we always highly recommend and support people to develop, just like you do. You also then need to create the business dynamics to allow that to happen, so that this person doesn't have evangelist as a little side job in their already incredible busy job, and that the KPIs that people are measured with, the KPIs that are on, say, their annual performance reviews, reflect that desire of the organization to have innovation in that way, scale up, have development shared, have time that is set aside to ensure that solutions are robust, that they can scale, that is recognized and not seen as a little side hustle for that person, because that is a big ask. And only when you create those kind of dynamics and really ensure that individuals see themselves as, yes, part of my role is to percolate information of maybe how I developed a tool and how amazing it can help other people too. That is part of my role, not something that I just happen to do and it's fine. And as well as leaders recognizing that and supporting their people in that way, and seeing themselves as leaders, not just of task doers, but actual learners and developers in the not just technical way, is really crucially important.
Absolutely. I think the other approach, equally important, if not more important, is more of a sort of top-down approach. So at the organizational level, you need to understand what processes are being run. And sometimes there's a focus on the bigger processes, whereas in actual fact, if you have many, many people running small processes lots of the time, that's a lot of time spent to be able to really capture that objectively. Off the back of that, once you understand that, then you're in a position to be able to see what the best cases are for return on investment on this. You want to choose your pilots correctly in terms of which ones you want to go for. Start with something reasonably simple where you can really demonstrate value and sort of get everybody on board with the process. Don't go for something mission critical and really big and complex first, because that's you're making life far more difficult for yourself. But then once that's done, once that pilot has been achieved, that needs to be communicated within the wider business. One thing that there is a lot of at the moment, and there was actually a government white paper which reflected this directly, is this concept of pilotitis, which is what you have when you have organizations where those kind of citizen developers, if you like, are off generating things without that engineering rigor. And if you're not careful, you then end up in a scenario where you have a proliferation of these things, which are unmanaged, often not maintained, different people doing the same thing. So it's really important that you build these things right the first time on platforms which can scale, and which are secure, and which do have high availability, and which you're able to see and plan the costs for. Because this is changing so quickly. But at the same time, there are a number of key players in this field where you need to, or you can build these platforms on. And I think that's something we're going to discuss in the next podcast.
Yes, looking forward to that.
Thank you. Thanks, Miriam.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today. If you'd like to find out more on anything we've discussed, please reach out to us at ten10.com, TEN10, for any technical aspects that we've covered. And for more on the people side, if you'd like to reach out to Miriam,
please find out more at coincidencity.co.uk. The exact spelling will be in the show notes.
Perfect. Thanks, Miriam. And well, we look forward to seeing you on the next one when we actually talk about how we can move away from the sort of abstract concepts of AI and how you can actually get started in terms of piloting this within your own organization. So thank you very much and look forward to seeing you next time.